With free agency slowing down, much like I do after a short walk, I thought it would be the perfect time to evaluate the Raiders' moves so far. Let's dive into the team's recent pickups and take a closer look at each one. First up, the Raiders re-signed Isaiah Pola to a 2-year, $8.45 million deal. This was a move I really liked, not just because he's my cousin, but because Pola is a player who is still growing into his potential. After a full season of playing last year, he really showed some promise as one of the standout players in the secondary. With key players like Trayvon Mullen and Marcus Peters leaving, it's clear that Pola is stepping into a bigger role. I have confidence that head coach Pete Carroll, who coached Polamalu's uncle, Troy Polamalu, at USC, can help him reach his peak. If the Raiders don't bring in additional safeties, Polamalu could have a significant impact this year, especially considering the contract he signed. I'd give this move a solid B for now. Now let's talk about one of the biggest moves of the offseason, the trade with the Seattle Seahawks. The Raiders sent a third-round pick in this year's draft to acquire quarterback Geno Smith. This trade caught my attention, and while Smith wasn't initially at the top of my list, the connection with head coach Pete Carroll made it a logical move. Carroll and Smith have a strong bond from their time in Seattle, and it makes sense that Carroll would bring in a quarterback he's familiar with. There were other options, like Russell Wilson, who could have worked too, but the Raiders get their guy in Smith. This trade not only secures the quarterback position, but also allows the team to focus on other needs in the draft without worrying about finding a quarterback. For a third-round pick, I think the trade was a good deal. It gave the Raiders a solid starter at quarterback, without the usual chaos many teams face when scrambling for a QB. Plus, this move allows the Raiders to be flexible in the draft, where they now don't have to prioritize picking a quarterback early. With the 6th overall pick, they can either strengthen the defense or go after a top-tier running back or wide receiver. This was a smart move, and while I'm not giving it an A just yet, because there are still questions about Geno Smith's potential contract extension, I'd give this trade a B+. If Geno Smith doesn't live up to his contract, that could be a concern, but overall, I think it was a solid move for the Raiders. Moving on, the Raiders made another key move by re-signing defensive tackle Adam Butler to a 3-year, $16.5 million deal. I really like this signing. Butler is often overlooked, but he's been a quietly effective player, especially on the defensive line. Last season, he had one of his best years with the Raiders, and he provides much-needed depth at a critical position. It's great to see the team bring him back at a reasonable price. With Butler reuniting with defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, there's a chance his role could grow, so I'd give this move a solid B. Next up, the Raiders' first actual free agent signing was safety Jeremy Chinn, who was brought in on a 2-year, $16 million deal. This was a move I really liked. The Raiders had just lost Trayvon Merrick to the Carolina Panthers, and while I was hoping Merrick would stay, I totally understood why he went for the big payday. Chinn, though, is an excellent replacement. Coming off his best season yet, he has just as much potential as Merrick, and he's a great fit for the Raiders' needs. He's a versatile, athletic, and physical safety who can make an immediate impact, especially in Pete Carroll's defensive system. I think the Raiders did a great job here, especially given how affordable the deal was. Many people are sleeping on the Raiders' free agency moves this year, but I think this was a smart signing. For that, I'd give it a B+. Now, my favorite move of the offseason so far has to be the re-signing of Malcolm Koonce to a 1-year, $12 million prove-it deal. I was thrilled when I saw this news. Koonce was one of those players I feared the Raiders might lose because he might want a bigger contract. But with his injury history and limited playing time last season, he seemed motivated to return and prove himself. Re-signing him at a discount is a smart move for the Raiders. Koonce has the potential to be a key player opposite Max Crosby if he stays healthy and lives up to his upside. Having him back in the defensive system that suits him is a big win for the team. If Koonce can show his worth in 2025, he could be a long-term asset, so I'd give this move an A. Finally, the Raiders signed cornerback Lonnie Johnson Jr. from the Carolina Panthers, adding more depth to the secondary. Johnson has bounced around the NFL, but he's known for his versatility. At his size, he fits well in Pete Carroll's defensive scheme. Although Johnson hasn't had much impact in the league so far, his role with the Raiders this season may be more focused on special teams. Still, after watching his press conference, I have a lot of respect for him, and it'll be interesting to see how he contributes. Lonnie Johnson Jr. might not be a household name, but you can tell he's a player with a chip on his shoulder, eager to prove himself. He's excited for the opportunity in Las Vegas, and after hearing about his meeting with Pete Carroll, it's clear that Johnson respects the coach and is ready to make an impact. While we can't expect the Raiders to recreate the defensive success Carroll had in Seattle, Johnson seems like a player who will provide depth in the secondary. If he can offer anything more than that, it would be a bonus for the team. However, given his limited experience and the fact that he's mostly seen as a depth piece, I'd rate this move a C+. Next, let's talk about linebacker Elandon Roberts. Before the Raiders signed him, I didn't know much about him, but after doing some research and watching his press conference, I became a fan. With the vacancy left by Robert Spillane's departure to the New England Patriots, the Raiders brought in Roberts on a one-year, $3 million deal, which I think is a fantastic bargain. Roberts is a veteran who adds much-needed depth to the linebacker position, and he brings a leadership presence that could prove invaluable. After listening to his press conference, I could see him wearing the green dot this season. While I'm not saying he'll be better than Robert Spillane, Roberts is very similar in terms of play style and production. His PFF grades and ability to stop the run are nearly identical to Spillane's. Both players have some struggles in coverage, but if Roberts can focus on being the heart of the defense and handle his responsibilities, he'll be a great addition. It's also worth mentioning that Steelers fans were disappointed to see Roberts leave, which makes me feel more confident about this signing. Just like when we lost Spillane to the Patriots, Steelers fans clearly valued Roberts. Given his leadership and his strong press conference, I'm excited to see him in the silver and black, so I'd give this move a B+. Finally, the Raiders signed cornerback Eric Stokes to a one-year, $4 million deal. Stokes, a former first-round pick for the Green Bay Packers, has had a bit of an up-and-down career so far. One of the things that made him stand out early on was his blazing 4.29-second 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine. Eric Stokes, a former first-round pick for the Green Bay Packers, has shown flashes of brilliance, especially with his incredible 4.29-second 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine. However, his speed hasn't always translated into on-field success. After a solid rookie season, injuries have slowed him down, and he hasn't quite lived up to expectations. That said, Stokes had a better season last year, and a change of scenery could be just what he needs to revitalize his career. The Raiders are bringing him in to provide depth at cornerback, a position that still needs more attention, especially in free agency and the draft. While I don't expect Stokes to be a star, the potential is there, and this is definitely a low-risk, high-reward signing. Because of that, I'd give this move a B-. The last player the Raiders have signed so far is running back Raheem Mostert, who was brought in on a one-year, $2.1 million deal. This is another smart, value-driven move by the Raiders. Mostert, despite dealing with injuries throughout his career, had an impressive season just 2 years ago when he made the Pro Bowl and led the league with 21 touchdowns. Last season wasn't his best, but for just $2.1 million, he's a solid addition. He also has experience with the Raiders' offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, so he's familiar with the system. If Mostert can stay healthy, he could still be a productive running back. The Raiders may also add another running back through the draft, but Mostert provides solid depth in the meantime. This is another low-risk, high-reward move, and I'd give it a solid B. Now, I know I've given a lot of these moves a B grade, but I honestly think the Raiders have had one of the most underrated offseasons so far. Sure, they haven't landed the biggest names or made flashy moves, but they've been smart with their signings, bringing in players who can help fill key needs. I know some Raider fans were hoping for bigger signings, but the team is making calculated decisions, and I appreciate that. Heading into Week 2 of free agency and the NFL Draft, I hope the Raiders can continue making moves to address positions of need, like linebacker, running back, wide receiver, cornerback, and defensive line. Adding depth to the offensive line would also be helpful. Overall, for the first week of free agency, I'd give the Raiders a solid B. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Or am I being too optimistic because, let's be honest, I am a biased Raider fan? Let me know what grade you'd give the Raiders so far this offseason in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.